I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, hundreds of San Diego firefighters are now on the lines near Palm Springs, where a fire has burned more than 15 square miles.
And a lawsuit, countersuit, depositions, and subpoenas, how Mayor Filner's legal troubles could play out inside and out of the courtroom. I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, a new gene therapy trial underway in San Diego helps patients with brain cancer, how others may benefit from this unusual gene suicide treatment.
Also tonight, immigration reform is presenting some tough choices for Republican lawmakers. We'll look at one district where a congressman is in the hot seat. And we're taking you to summer camp tonight. This one helps children with permanent physical disabilities to do the same things able-bodied kids get to do at camp. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. About 200 San Diego County firefighters have joined the battle against a huge wildfire in Riverside County. The Silver Fire has burned more than 15 square miles along the San Jacinto Mountains, just outside of Palm Springs. Fire crews are working against high winds there. The fire is threatening 500 homes. 15 buildings have already been burned. One civilian was hurt. About 1,800 neighbors have been told to head to evacuation centers. The search tonight for a kidnapping and murder suspect has spread from San Diego County to 4 states and Mexico. Police say James DiMaggio may have taken homemade explosives when he fled a burning home in the East County, and they say his car may be booby-trapped. Sightings have been reported in Oregon and Washington. Police believe he took 16-year-old Hannah Anderson. Her mother's body was found in the home, along with the body of a young boy. Police say DNA testing is needed to determine if it's 8-year-old Ethan Anderson. State auditor says California has wasted more than $26 million in federal money because of problems over electronic voting systems. The money was supposed to help get updated equipment, but millions got spent on now outlawed voting systems. San Diego and 3 other counties bought those systems. San Diego Mayor Bob Filner has hired a private attorney in connection with a controversial deal with developer Sunroad Enterprises. Filner is accused of taking $100,000 from the company for 2 pet projects in exchange for city land next to a Sunroad development. Filner has said one of his former aides arranged the deal. The money has been returned. Our media partner 10 News reports the case is being investigated by the Justice Department. Legal proceedings are underway in the lawsuit filed against Mayor Filner and a countersuit filed by the city. Peggy Pico explains the procedure and potential arguments.
The mayor's former communication director, Irene McCormick Jackson, is the only woman who's come forward so far to file a lawsuit. Meanwhile, the city attorney's office prepares to file a countersuit to recoup legal fees from the mayor. And criminal investigations may move forward as a result of the San Diego Sheriff's Sexual Harassment Hotline. Here to help put this in context and what we might expect next is employment law attorney Dan Eaton. Dan, welcome back.
Sure, nice to see you, Peggy.
Now, Mayor Filner's attorney basically asked for a change of venue from San Diego County to Imperial County. What evidence if any, is needed to make this happen, and how hard is it to get this change of venue?
Well, let's be clear about what we're talking about. Change of venue means change of place, and the basis on which the mayor's attorney is seeking this is that an impartial jury cannot be assembled. So the kind of evidence that he has introduced, evidence about polls showing how many San Diegans have made up their minds about this in the 70+%, the number of media mentions, 238 in San Diego media versus 6 in the Imperial County in their newspaper of record, almost 40 on KPBS alone, by the way. So this is the kind of evidence they're marshaling.
37 to be exact.
Well, 37, okay. But it's a tough thing to do. And the fact is that when you look in the past, the last big city mayor to try this was Kwame Kilpatrick out of Detroit. And federal judge said, no, we're not moving it out of Wayne County there. Closer to home in 2002, Kristen Rawson, the toxicologist who was accused of poisoning her husband, tried to do it, and the judge said no.
So not easy, not likely to go.
Very hard.
Okay, the mayor is scheduled to give his deposition this Friday, but his attorney filed a motion to, quote, quash the subpoena. What does that mean?
It means that he's saying the deposition cannot go forward on the scheduled date until the judge decides when it should go forward. And what the mayor is asking for, I've read the moving papers that the mayor's attorney filed, is that the deposition take place no sooner than 30 days after he was served. So it's going to take place probably sometime in September or early October. It's just not going to take place on the 9th.
Okay, what qualifies as sexual harassment under California law? Does it have to take place in the workplace?
Well, it doesn't have to take place in the workplace, but whether it takes place in the workplace or not, the plaintiff has to show that the conduct was severe or pervasive, both from her perspective and from the perspective of a reasonable woman in her similar condition. So the fact is that it is a very tough standard. And as far as it not being in the workplace, there are only certain kinds of relationships where people outside of the workplace can sue for sexual harassment, such as attorney-client, teacher-student, or the statute says similar kinds of relationships.
More than a dozen women have come forward now making these allegations. Is there a statute of limitation on filing sexual harassment claim? Because some of those women, it dates back to when he was a congressman.
Right, and yes, there is. When we're talking about outside of the workplace, under the California law that we are talking about, you're talking about a 2-year statute of limitations. And then, of course, the workplace harassment statute has its own particular statute of limitations. So a lot of these are probably time barred. There's more political pressure than legal pressure that's being brought to bear on these other
So
claims.
2 years, typically.
For outside of the workplace,
I see.
understand.
Okay. How about, could these women all get together and file a class action lawsuit?
Hard to see how a class action would work, because you'd have to show that it's capable of being proven by common proof. Given the variety of the different kinds of claims, even assuming that a lot of them are not time barred and you can get over the relationship issue that you have to establish, it's pretty hard to see this going forward as a class action. That doesn't mean that Irene McCormick Jackson is going to be the last of the lawsuits that will be filed.
Okay. How are sexual harassment cases typically settled?
Well, typically they're settled through mediation, and then eventually one party or the other pays. In this case, it's going to be tough to see how that goes forward, and one of the conditions of settlement may very well be that the mayor resigns. And so far, at least, he's adamant that he's not willing to do that.
All right. Now, many of these alleged incidents, as we said, occurred while the mayor was actually a Congress member. Are Congress members subject to sexual harassment
Well,
laws?
they are now. The Congressional Accountability Act of 1995 made Congress people subject to Title VII, which is the federal anti-discrimination law. That was enacted in January of 1995 when Mayor Filner was beginning his second term, and it passed the House of Representatives 390-0.
Did he vote for it?
He did. He was one of those who was there, and he voted yes.
All right. Well, we'll have continuing coverage on our website, kpbs.org. Employment law attorney Dan Eaton, thanks very much.
Sure, thank you.
Governor Jerry Brown is changing tactics regarding private prisons after trying to avoid using them. He'll ask federal judges to let him move 4,000 inmates to private cells. It's a strategy to comply with a court order to reduce overcrowding without releasing serious and violent offenders. Students' passing rates on California math and English tests fell slightly across the state this year. KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert joins us from the News Center with the San Diego results. How did city students and schools fare on the test this year, Kyla?
Well, in some ways, they fared better than the statewide average. You can take a look now. In San Diego Unified Schools, 61% of students passed state English tests this year, the same percentage as passed last year, and 54% passed the math tests, up from 52% last year. Passing rates in city schools held steady on history or social science tests and dropped slightly for science. The math and English tests are what California uses to measure school performance, and this is the first time in several years that results have dropped or leveled off across the state. I spoke with Nellie Meyer, who oversees academics at San Diego Unified, and she says the district is outperforming many of the state's other large urban school districts.
We've maintained our top status in science and in English, and in mathematics we're the third highest performing large urban. But we know that across the state, especially in the large urban districts, we are seeing the pains of the budget with that leveling off.
And Kyla, San Diego Unified was honored earlier this year, right, for narrowing the achievement gap between white and Latino students?
That's right. African American and Latino students did have much lower passing rates on the state's English and math tests than their white classmates. That gap has narrowed somewhat in both areas between white and Latino students in recent years, and it did again this year. But the difference in passing rates between African American and white students has held steady in English and actually grown slightly in math. But the passing rates for both groups of students have increased since 2009. Meyer told me that the state's new funding formula for schools, which is focused on giving more support to disadvantaged students, could actually help the district spread programs that are successful in closing that achievement gap to more schools across the city.
KPBS education reporter Kyla Calvert. 2 San Diegans will be honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the late Sally Ride, and UCSD chemistry professor Mario Molina. Ride was the first American woman in space, and Molina discovered how chlorofluorocarbons deplete the ozone layer. The awards will be given later this year. Immigration reform is going to be a hot topic during the congressional break this month, especially here in California, where changing demographics mean a rapidly changing constituency. Some Republicans will be facing tough choices on how to respond to their demands. From our Fronteras desk, Joe Replogle profiles one Republican congressman who finds himself in the hot seat.
Congressman Gary Miller, your constituents from the 31st District are holding you accountable. Over 50% of the voters in your 31st District are Latino and Asian American immigrants.
About 75 people held a rally on a recent Friday outside House Republican Gary Miller's office in Rancho Cucamonga, east of Los Angeles. They presented Miller's office with close to 2,000 signatures from voters and supporters of comprehensive immigration reform, including a path to citizenship for people in the country illegally. A smaller group, around 25 people, stood on the sidewalk and grass just outside the rally in mostly quiet protest. Robin Fidston was in this second group.
We don't have a broken immigration system, we have a broken law enforcement system. And we believe that the focus of our congressman should be on Americans.
Gary Miller, like all House representatives, is up for re-election next year, and political analysts and pro-immigration reform groups have identified him as susceptible to softening his thus far hardline stance on immigration issues. Some of Miller's opponents also think he's vulnerable. They're already playing up his record with an eye toward unseating him in the 2014 election. Here's an ad recently run on Spanish-language television, paid for by House Majority PAC, a super PAC aligned with the Democratic Party.
Miller votó en contra del DREAM Act y para deportar 800,000 jóvenes inmigrantes.
The ad notes that Miller voted against the DREAM Act, the bill that would have granted legal status to young people brought here by their parents illegally as children. And it highlights Miller's recent vote in favor of resuming deportations of Dreamers. With that record, the ad ends, Miller is the one who should go. Back home, Miller faces a diverse constituency. The 31st District is a mix of well-to-do bedroom communities and hard-scrabble towns, stretched out along the I-10 highway in Southern California's Inland Empire. Miller's support base comes mostly from the higher end of the economic scale here, from people like John and Linda Rodriguez. When I met them, they were helping their church run a summer camp at a local park. John and Linda are longtime residents of Rancho Cucamonga. They worry that giving a break to people in the country illegally will encourage more people to come.
In another 20 or 30, is it going to happen again? And then in another 20 or 30, it's going to happen again. It just seems like there should be, this is it.
But Miller's constituents of the future, the ones he needs to win over if he hopes to keep his seat in next year's election, are younger. And many come from recent immigrant families, people like Sandra Gonzalez and her 2 voting-age children.
A&L Auto Body and Paint.
Gonzalez and her husband run an auto body shop that pulls in $500,000 a year. They both originally came to the U.S. illegally, but were allowed to stay here under the 1986 amnesty. Gonzalez became a citizen 3 years ago. I asked her if she voted in the last election.
I did, and I'm always going to be using my vote because I know that's my power. The way to show that we are here.
Gonzalez was at the recent protest in front of Congressman Miller's office, advocating for immigration reform on behalf of the local Catholic Church. She talked to some of the counter-protesters, and she thinks their concerns are not actually that far apart.
I don't want my people crossed illegally to this country. I don't want people that is illegal break the law and come here and work. I'm on your side. That's why we need to change laws.
Congressman Miller didn't give an interview for this story, but his views echo the Republican Party line. A spokesman for Miller says the congressman's top concerns are preserving jobs for American workers and securing the borders. But he wants to hear out all sides. If Gonzalez is right and Congressman Miller's most vocal constituents can come to agree on at least some aspects of immigration reform, maybe there's hope that Congress can do the same. Jill Replogle, KPBS News.
Some surgeons at Moore's Cancer Center in San Diego are among the first to try a new type of gene therapy for brain cancer. Peggy Pico shows us how it works.
It's the first clinical trial of its kind in Southern California and one of only 3 in the world. Neurosurgeons call it suicide gene therapy for hard-to-treat brain tumors. Here to explain how it works and why it's important is Dr. Clark Chen, Vice Chair of Neurosurgery, UC San Diego Health System. Dr. Chen, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Now, the suicide gene therapy, as it's called, precisely delivers treatment to certain types of brain tumors while leaving surrounding brain tissue intact, I understand.
That's correct.
What type of brain cancer does it target?
The therapy is really designed to target a particular form of cancer called glioblastoma. This is a form of cancer that is the most frequent occurrence of brain tumors and is one of the most devastating of cancers. The average survival for a patient who's been diagnosed with this disease is about 14 months. And in fact, for instance, Senator Kennedy had expired about a year after he was diagnosed with this particular tumor.
And tell us, going back to Senator Ted Kennedy, he was one very public example. What sort of symptoms does somebody who have this, what does the patient experience?
In the case of Senator Kennedy, he suffered a seizure, and that eventually led to the diagnosis of the cancer. The presentation of this tumor could be very subtle. I've had patients who have came to me because they felt that they were not able to express themselves as well as before, and it turns out there's a tumor in the area that controls their speech. There are also patients who present with dramatic presentations like seizures and even coma.
Why are these particular types of brain tumors, or brain tumors in general, so difficult to treat?
One of the major challenges in treating brain cancers is that there's something called the blood-brain barrier. This is a natural mechanism that you and I have evolved to protect our brain from harmful chemicals. The problem is, if you have a brain cancer, your chemotherapy is also prevented from going into the brain by this barrier. And so we were trying to bypass that barrier by directly injecting the therapy into the tumor.
And we actually have some video of that, of you doing this procedure on a patient. So let's take a look at that video. And while we're looking at it, walk us through what happens here. What's happening? You're under an MRI, correct?
That's right. And so what you're seeing here is we're visualizing in real time where the catheter that's going to deliver the virus is relative to the neural structures. See, to a neurosurgeon, this is extraordinary. To be able to see the catheter in its real location as we're advancing it to the tumor.
So you were putting that catheter into the tumor, and then you were injecting what?
We were then injecting the gene therapy. This gene therapy is in the form of a virus that encodes a particular enzyme. This enzyme converts a completely benign antifungal drug into a chemotherapy. So what happens is the virus is engineered only to replicate and grow in the tumor. As the tumor gets infected, they make this enzyme, and they actually locally convert the antifungal therapy into chemotherapy, so the chemotherapy is only in the spot of the tumor.
Right, and how is that? So, and it causes the cells to self-destruct.
That's right.
Correct? Okay.
That's right.
How is this different from standard chemotherapy?
The standard chemotherapy, you take a medicine either by IV injection into the veins or by the mouth, and the chemotherapy reaches virtually every single cell in your body. In contrast, the direct injection of this gene therapy into the tumor creates only chemotherapy in the tumor. And so what that means is any of the side effects of the chemotherapy on non-tumor cells is minimized.
Are there side effects to the gene therapy treatment?
So far, we haven't observed any side effects. Potentially there may be, and we are carefully following our patients for any potential side effects.
How many people in the clinical trial right now, and so far, what has the outcome been?
We've treated a total of 12 patients at UCSD, and the results are very promising. That said, I have to caution that this is a phase 1 clinical trial, meaning that we're looking at the safety of this approach rather than the actual efficacy. That said, our patients are doing quite well.
Could this procedure, if the next phase progresses and everything moves as planned, could it be used to treat other types of cancer?
Absolutely, absolutely. It could be modified to treat just about any form of cancer that could be imaged on the MRI.
Is the trial still going on, and can people participate?
Absolutely. The trial is still ongoing, and I would actually put a shout out there for patients who have suffered recurrence of this tumor. At that point, there's really no standard of care, and it's important to participate in these trials so that we could advance their therapies.
All right, Dr. Clark Chen with UCSD Moores Cancer Center, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
The Adaptive Sports and Recreation Association in National City provides year-round support for kids in wheelchairs. And for 27 years now, they've put on a summer camp for kids between the ages of 4 and 18.
I've killed about 19 buffalo in my days. I know I can knock that sign down. Are you ready?
From trying to hit the bullseye with archery to taking a swing at golf.
Whoa, good job!
The Junior Wheelchair Sports Camp is the country's largest for children with permanent physical disabilities. What's unique about this program is they start at age 4, building confidence, core strength, and developing independence so kids no longer rely on their parents to wheel them around. Patrick Iveson has a spinal cord injury and has been coming to this camp for 15 years.
I attribute everything I am today to this camp and being involved in sports.
He's done it all, and for the first time is volunteering to inspire other kids.
Any sport you can imagine, short of skydiving, which that's on the plan for this next year. I was actually talking to a couple buddies of mine. We're gonna do that.
The camp is a building block to provide kids in wheelchairs the same opportunities able-bodied children have, from competing in wheelchair rugby and tennis to swimming lessons. Director John Richard says they also provide campers financial assistance to attend, and they're always looking for donations.
And especially with this population, they have extensive medical issues, medical bills, and so what we don't want them to do is not attend due to financial hardships.
Empower, inspire, and thrive. That's the goal of the program. 60 kids from San Diego and throughout Southern California participated in this year's summer camp, and more than 500 have benefited since the program began 27 years ago.
I'm Jeffrey Brown. On the next news hour, getting old doesn't mean leaving a cherished life behind as seniors find ways to age in place. That's Thursday on the PBS NewsHour.
We're going to see a little warm up over the next few days. Coastal temperatures mostly in the low to mid 70s, upper 70s, low 80s for the inland valleys. The mountains will also see upper 70s and low 80s with plenty of sunshine. Sunny in the desert too, with temperatures near 106 by Sunday. President Obama visited Camp Pendleton to pay tribute to the troops yesterday, but San Diego's military men and women are also honored along several of our major highways. Ken Kramer explains in tonight's story about San Diego.
Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery, and here is something you might not have seen, but it's worth a look. It's a Blue Star Memorial. Blue Star. To understand this story, you have to know a little bit about Blue Star highway signs. You ever seen them? They're all over the country. Here's one in Washington along Interstate 90. Here's another we caught in DeRidder, Louisiana. Highways 27, 112, and 171 meet up there. In California, Interstate 5 south of Tracy, there's a memorial designating it as a Blue Star highway. In fact, in San Diego, Interstates 5, 8, other roads in the county too, have been named Blue Star highways. So where's the Blue Star come from? Well, go back, World War II, you'd see these service flags, they were called. The Blue Star meant you had a family member in the service in wartime. However many stars you displayed on your service flag, that's how many were in the military. If there was a gold star, that meant you lost a family member. So after the war, a group called the National Council of State Garden Clubs started beautifying roadways and putting up these Blue Star markers to honor veterans. First on a few highways and then more and more, and now 70,000 miles of road are designated as Blue Star highways. Or here, Lindo Lake in Lakeside, right around a grove of pepper trees, out there on the lawn, all by itself, is a little memorial marker that if you didn't know it was there, you could miss reading that it marks that spot as a Blue Star byway. If you travel around the country, you find them at places like roadside rest stops. Here's one at a Veterans Park in Medford, Oregon. But the truth is there are now so many Blue Star roadways, hundreds, that nobody is sure anymore where all the highway markers are, let alone the byways. Some people try to find them, catalog them, document their exact latitude and longitude and condition. There are websites devoted to keeping track of them and ensuring they're in good shape and continue to pay tribute to the veterans they honor. Which brings us back here, Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery out on Point Loma, where there is what's called a Blue Star Memorial. Not on a highway or a byway. No mention of that on this one. No need. Not here. This Blue Star monument stands alone as a tribute to veterans and something well worth noting about San Diego.
You can see more of Ken's stories about San Diego tonight at 8 here on KPBS. And tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Good night.